Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Checked Before. This time, Pen Pals. Yeah, Pen Pals. I think they still do this. I think they still do this. Maybe not as much with email, but it's still the same thing, right? Pen Pals. On this episode, It's All Been Checked Before. Hey, become our Pen Pal. You want to hear from us? Become a Patreon member. Patreon.com/IABD. And yeah, you can get personal emails from us, from the IABD folks. You go there, support us, the radio hour, the entire network. Help us with our offerings, and maybe we'll become your pen pal. Kind of like this episode of It's All Been Checked Before about pen pals on IAB TV.
Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Checked Before. The regular hosts are all here.
This is Stephen.
And Keith.
Jimmy-Jerome. And we are here to talk the episode Pen Pals. First impressions.
Well, I'm going to jump to the middle of one of my statements and say that this is another episode where I thought it was better than it had a right to be.
Okay.
Uh-oh. That's not a good sign.
I think I'll figure it out as we get through it. There's a lot of it I like a lot, and there's a lot of good conversations, and then there's some weird things. I wouldn't say it blew me away, but I think I ended up liking it too. I guess we'll find our way through this. I like the discovery sometimes as we go through discovery.
Sure.
Turns out, didn't like it.
I didn't care for it very much. The Prime Directive stuff got real messy and inconsistent. And that was my biggest, I spent most of the episode getting frustrated with the way they were handling the Prime Directive. So
I wrote that down. Got real muddled. I want to hear what Jimmy has to say about this.
That sounds like something I might have written for the next episode regarding Stephen.
Yeah, I'm very curious.
Yeah.
I guess I was less bothered by that. I think I got more caught up in the idea of the symmetry of what they were doing, or what I felt like they might have been doing with, giving Wesley this advice on how to handle command and how to make these kinds of decisions, and then showing Picard really being put to the test, I think.
So let's start at the beginning of the episode. Picard takes Troy horseback so he can horseback ride. She's just going to watch. It was the first time we really saw Picard being friends with one of the crewmen, and I thought it was kind of interesting that it was Troy. I also felt very much watching this scene that this was Gene Roddenberry's do-over for Captain Pike. They're both horse fans, as we know. Their names both start with P-I and then a K sound. P-I-C, P-I-K.
Oh, yeah.
Different long eye, short eye, but
sure.
That scene to me just made me think, this is his redo of The Cage. I mean, not the whole episode, but the character,
It's funny you say that. I mean, I laughed when you said that at first, but I thought, wait a minute. As soon as you started getting through that, I mean, the idea of Pike versus Picard, that's kind of funny. This, noting the similarity, but that might not be so far-fetched.
Colleen was watching I think she might have watched both episodes with me, but she heard me groan when this started with the holodeck. But I was pleasantly surprised it was not all holodeck episode. I actually liked that holodeck sequence, actually. I thought that was really cool.
It's funny because I thought about something similar when they came back to the holodeck. I thought that the interruption they had quickly, it was to prevent Patrick Stewart from having to get on the horse. Okay, we don't have to go through the stunt process. Let's just go start the episode. Apparently, I ended up being wrong later.
Yeah, I definitely thought that, we cut away real quick because, I don't know, there's been plenty of holodeck sequences. Maybe the Orville's trained me to think, they're going to cut away and we're not going to see, what actually happens. But the fact that they come back to that later in the episode made me think, they got to get their budget worth out of this location.
That is exactly what I thought too. When it came back, I was like, wait a minute. Oh yeah. It's funny when you get into the sci-fi mindset of this being the future, and it's more impressive somehow when they go to Earth, quote unquote. It's like, wow, how they managed to do that? I was like, oh, wait a minute. But yeah, but if they're going to be on a location or at this place, which could literally be just a few yards away from where they're actually filming, who knows? It makes sense that you would get some use out of Data showing up to have a conversation there.
I like what we learned about Picard in this episode, where Troy says Picard wants a companion, not a pet. Although Picard in Star Trek Picard has a dog that he's pretty fond of. Troy mentions in this episode a Beta Z kitten, and I really want to know what a Beta Z kitten is.
Yeah, me too.
Probably has antenna, like Lockjaw from Marvel.
I don't know, but
They're always pregnant. I don't know. No, I shouldn't cast aspersions about betas.
What?
I just know that.
That's true.
You're right. That's true.
Picard gets called to the bridge. I thought it was odd he took the time to change out of his clothes. I felt like he should have it's not like he's never gone on the bridge in off-duty clothing before.
Wow, I hadn't noticed that. That's another budget thing, most likely. I mean, he was obviously dressed up to be on location, and then they didn't really think to, continuity.
And it always makes me think when they go in there, it's like, oh, they have their own costumes. But I think the way you guys explain that, I think it's elementary, my dear, makes sense. But I'm still always like, wow, they're really going all out for this. But it makes sense if you're going to get on a horse, getting horse gear. But
well, I'm sure it's probably easier for them with replicators as well.
Right.
That's true.
At least within the framework of what's going on there. But
that's true.
It's still, logically, it wouldn't make sense if there's an emergency for him to change out of that.
Right.
So presumably the replicators can't do that, can they?
I mean, in Next Gen, we always see them get dressed before they go into the holodeck. So I don't think at this point it can, but who knows? Well,
I mean, what I should say is, I guess they wouldn't have transporter technology to change their clothes for them or something.
Like I said, I don't think we ever see that happen in Next Gen, so I'm going to say no. But I would not preclude future Star Treks from doing that because that seems like a great idea.
Well, anyway, my first note, even before the holodeck, was just a little bit of Riker. We've been talking about that this season, but I guess maybe it's just a sign of the type of person I'm growing into. It's just I like him so much more than I recall when I was much younger. Something about his mannerisms. It's entertaining, even when it's over the top. But just he gets a little more extra sometimes. And this is one of the times where he said, "These planets live fast and die hard," and then just kind of settled back into that pose. I was like, huh. I thought back to the previous week with the whole thing with his father relationship. Mm-hmm. There's something distasteful about the idea of them kind of falling back into that kind of like a toxic kind of thing. And it made me realize by contrast, I think one of the things I like about Riker this season is we're getting into this idea of him being, the whole man's man kind of thing without it seeming too toxic, I guess. Or at least it doesn't feel that way to me. Just,
right.
No, he seems on friendly terms with all the women of the crew. In fact, They all seem to like him, and not in a creepy way, like hanging all over him, but just like he respects them and they respect him. And the teacher conference. And it was like a parent-teacher conference without any parents.
That's funny, yeah.
And Riker saying, I took charge of Wesley's education, and this is his next step and everything. And I guess I didn't expect them to really follow through so literally.
That is funny.
I mean, I knew that they were going to follow through with, he's on the Enterprise and they're going to help him along. But I guess I didn't expect a scene where they're all like, yeah, we're actually discussing his education here and what's best to help him learn and grow. And I actually really liked that. They're taking that seriously and taking time from their jobs to look out for this kid and help him.
I did too, and I thought Pulaski's concerns felt valid. Like, I know I've been down on her a little bit, but now I'm completely coming back around the other way. I thought her concerns were valid, but at the end, didn't Riker just kind of be like, "Thanks for everything you said. I'm making the call here," which I guess at some point he has to. I guess.
Well, that's the theme of the episode too. Really, it's
you're right.
Someone having authority in over a certain situation or a certain project. The good leader takes all the input, thinks about it, and makes the decision, and it's done.
I did like, though, and this is skipping ahead a little bit. We'll come back, but
sure.
The scene in the hallway, I guess I kind of thought it was weird. Maybe I didn't really like it. But Pulaski sees Wesley going in to have once his team's assembled. Mm-hmm. And it's a very odd scene. She's kind of supportive, which she wasn't at all when he wasn't looking. And I get that. Like, you can express concern in private, but still want to be encouraging out loud. Yeah. But it just felt very odd scene to me. Like, oh, did you just need to shove Pulaski in here? Because I don't know. It didn't work, in my opinion.
It was janky.
When I was thinking of another hallway scene when you said that. Now that too was a little. It felt a little clunky. It was. I mean, it turned out to be useful in a way, but I think it just the way that it was written might have been more elegant if it was executed differently. Yeah. I guess the thing with him catching up to Riker and Troy as they were walking, the "Can I walk with you" thing. Mm-hmm. It was like they were struggling to keep that moving as quickly as possible.
Riker says these planets live fast and die hard.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
It means they're all Bruce Willis fans.
That's what I thought. I was like, what the hell is he talking about? But that amused me. And then, my first fashion note, and my last one for this episode, love Picard's hat. When I was trying to be pseudo cool in high school, I had 2 of those hats that I would wear. And guess what? Not cool. Looks great on Picard, though. Really cool. Looked really good. And then, and this goes back, and I'm sorry I didn't bring this up earlier, but Picard says he doesn't like the whatever that word is, anthropomorphize anything.
Yeah.
But, and maybe he's not as much of this as other captains and people. Doesn't he do that to the ship all the time?
Yeah, everybody does, and that's
right. I don't think he does it like Kirk did it.
I agree, but he doesn't make it a woman. But I do think he does give it human characteristics. So anyway, sorry, I had those notes going back. So
I think that's a human limitation that happens quite a bit. Really, you can't help but anthropomorphize things. That's the word, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah, the opening scene with the when they got to the conference room, they were talking about Wesley's education and so forth. Again, I started thinking about things in a way that I wouldn't have back then, which is the function that scene was serving, the way that they were very explicitly giving you expository information. I mean, the way you would have to in a series like that, the syndicated format with people kind of tuning in and out and catching up. It's like, back in this episode, when I did this, or this is my responsibility, we need to do these things with Wesley. Here's why we're doing this. And it still managed to feel kind of refreshing, for lack of a better word. I don't know. Just we were talking about that. The way the conversation flowed, even with knowing that very utilitarian purpose of it, still felt nice.
Yeah, it didn't feel too exposition-y for me.
Yeah, it was another. I feel like they've been on a roll with these opening scenes. Like I find myself thinking, oh, this seems really long, but I'm also enjoying them. Like the egg scene we had a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, but no, this felt good. And I mean, part of me was like, oh no, this is a Wesley episode. But then I remembered, I don't mind Wesley episodes so far.
Yeah.
But I keep thinking, oh, this is going to be the one that everyone has been talking about. This is why people hate Wesley. But spoiler alert, I wasn't annoyed by Wesley that much this episode.
So it's funny because at first I started writing it as though what the other part of this was the B story, but it's it's the title, of course, shows that this is that Wesley's thing was actually the B story, even though it seemed to come first somehow.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, no, they were getting into it first, but the whole thing about the destroyed planets, I guess, was really the tip off for what was supposed to be the episode. My next note, and this is, I think, why I came into this thinking that I liked it, or even most of the way through it, is early on I noted that the series seems to shine when the stakes are moderated without it being the ship itself being in this catastrophic peril, like something bad is going to. No, they're not trying to save the universe, not trying to save the ship from blowing up. It's just here's some things that can go on in the future. Here's a new version of how coming of age works, especially in Wesley's case. That they've been talking it up for a while. Now we're actually seeing the difference between how Wesley would grow up as an ensign, as opposed to other normal children, and of course, as opposed to children in the past or present or whatever.
Yeah, so I agree with you that things are different, and they illustrated that, but they also illustrate how much they stay the same. Like I said, the conference felt like a parent-teacher conference for an orphan, with everybody else filling in instead of his parents, and then it very much felt like he looked like he was getting called to the principal's office when he went in there. I did notice that when he came into the conference room, though, Riker then almost immediately addressed him as Wesley instead of Mr. Crusher or Ensign Crusher, like he so often does. And it bothered me a little bit because I'm like, this is a big professional moment for him. But also, if you think about just how nervous he seemed going in, maybe it was good Riker took that moment to remind him, hey, you're among friends. This isn't, it's serious, but you're not in trouble. This is, a good thing.
I really like that observation. It's, I think they took those few seconds and really set the scene. And I think under those circumstances, a Riker figure would realize, okay, we've served our purpose. We've given him that look. he understands the gravity of what's about to happen here. Now let's just go ahead and jump in and give him some good news or give him a reason to relax.
So should we credit the writer or the director for these things that we're talking about?
I don't know. That's
so the
interesting.
director is Winrich Colby. Am I saying that right? That's an interesting name. I have no idea if I'm saying it right. He was born in the Netherlands, so I guess that's a Dutch name. But he directed 18 episodes of Voyager, 13 of Deep Space Nine, and he is credited as director of Star Trek World Tour. And then he directed 16 episodes of The Next Generation, including the series finale, All Good Things.
Oh, wow.
So clearly they really liked him. This was his second episode directing. He directed Where Silence Has Lease before. Clearly, yeah, I know. Well, I didn't really care for this episode either. Clearly,
man.
They liked him as a director because, you don't let somebody you don't like direct the series finale and hire him so many times over and over again.
The one other thought I had about the teacher conference was at the end of Godfather Part 2, when it's a flashback, but Tom's talking about, well, me and your dad, he's talking to Michael about, me and your father had conversations about your future. And Michael's like, my future. You had conversations about my future. And I'm like, that's what they're doing with him. But it's a different scenario in that it's obviously a starship and he's an ensign. Senior people should talk about his future. But that's what kind of clicked in my head. Although it's not, it's analogous, but it's far from perfectly analogous.
So the story, because we talked to the director, the writers, the story is by Hannah Louise Scherer, who was a story editor for The Next Generation. She does have a written by for When the Bow Breaks, previous episode where the kids were kidnapped.
Wow.
And then
I didn't like that one.
She wrote the teleplay for Skin of Evil, where Tasha Yar died. And she wrote We'll Always Have Paris, that Picard episode. And then she'll have one more credit after this for the price. But I think it's interesting. The story but teleplay was by Melinda Snodgrass. So maybe they took it away from her. And Snodgrass, this was her. She was a story editor as well. But this was her second episode she wrote. She wrote Measure of a Man. So maybe they're like, oh, we need to clean up the data stuff. Let's give it to Snodgrass. She does good data. So we get to Wesley meeting his team. The first one he meets is Ensign Davies, played by Nicholas Cascone. He's best known for the movie Titanic and The Cell. Just 45 credits. This is the only Star Trek one I see for him. I hated him immediately. He was so smarmy. That whole give me a signal and I'll take over for you.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't think he meant to be smarmy. There are other things in the episode that make me think he's not trying to be a jerk. Yeah. But he comes across as a total jerk.
Well, I think that's the great thing about it. That's the point. I mean, I love just how this shaked out or shook, whatever.
Shook.
You know what I'm saying?
That they're professional.
Well, yes, just the way that they needed to demonstrate Wesley's discomfort with things. I felt like I would react in pretty much the same way. I would feel kind of out of my depth if somebody just dropped, as the audience member, dropped me into this situation, and I had to assume control over these people and say, you might know a little bit more about these things than I do, but I'm going to go ahead and just make you do something.
Yeah, and I think we were made to feel like, oh, this is going to go terribly. And then when Wesley, he's weighing, oh, what should I do? And then he finally's like, oh, we should go ahead and do that. The guy's like, okay, I'll do it. And that's the end of the conversation. Yeah.
I guess at that point he was just being a good teacher and pushing Wesley in the way he needed to be pushed.
I guess.
Yeah, that almost made me wonder if he was in on it somehow, if these people were somehow coached,
probably
in a way to behave with him.
Probably.
Not let him off the hook too soon.
And I don't think you'd have to be specifically coached to do it. Just the culture of Starfleet, we're going to help each other along, but you have to do the right things to make them a good officer and not just make it too easy on them.
Mm-hmm. I would like to think that there was that sort of collective benevolence involved. And even if it weren't, I would also be satisfied to think that this is just the way that the people are. I mean, they understand that an order is an order. We're getting to this point where, it's good to have these kinds of discussions and have people think things through. But if it comes down to it, I'm not going to suddenly just try to, overthrow this person or whatever, or be disagreeable just to be disagreeable.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's on the Enterprise. We wouldn't expect him to be a total jerk. Otherwise, he should have never been on the Enterprise. Even though we've had plenty of examples where people that are total jerks are on the Enterprise, but
Sure.
you know what?
I thought it was interesting. Maybe I got this wrong, but there's a 6-week jump from the beginning of the episode to when they get to the.
I thought that was very interesting as well.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting that Wesley was still getting steamrolled 6 weeks later. This was before he had his conversation, but they didn't really develop the other two officers. Ann Gillespie played Ensign Hildebrand.
The husband and wife team.
And Whitney Rideback played Ensign Allens. I mean, Whitney Rideback doesn't even have a picture on IMDb. Best known for Friday the 13th Part 6 and the movie 1941, Rocky 2, and then this. So not a huge number of credits here.
Well, and they made them husband and wife, and then I thought in the one scene it was kind of intimated that, well, they're husband and wife, so of course they agree, which is completely the opposite of the way they should have played it, which is like they should have both been like, well, I disagree. I think we should do this. Well, I think we should do this. It's like, oh, married couples. But Wesley wouldn't understand that.
Well, yeah, I don't know. It's I wanted to throw out some joke there about husband and wife teams not being not being worth the trouble of hiring or whatever. But who knows? In the future, I would also like to think that people have gotten to the point where they don't subscribe to the whole opposites attract.
Well, but I also see it's not even really an issue, but I just thought the animated like, well, they're married, so they're going to agree no matter what. It's like, nope, they're two people on a ship doing two different things, and they're scientists more or less.
The only thing that I even noticed from them was the later briefing when they were talking about their options, and first of all, I guess I was focused on how well and satisfying it seemed that his team seemed to be kind of looking up to him or sharing the credit with him, kind of throwing things over. You go ahead and lead our part in this briefing. But also, it seemed like they were sort of finishing each other's sentences. They're kind of interleaving.
I hated that scene. I really did. I'm not kidding. It just everybody was. They were talking, they were all finishing each other's sentences. You're right, Keith. It was like they were four people with one brain. And I guess that was meant to make it seem like they were all in sync and that Wesley was doing a good job. But to me, it just came across as this feels very artificial. There's no way this many people finished this many of each other's sentences.
I
did not like any bit of it.
With a couple, but yeah.
It wasn't just the couple either, though. Davies and Wesley were doing it too, and it wasn't just one sentence; it was like every sentence.
Maybe they were foreshadowing the next week.
I feel like the three of us finished each other's
sandwiches.
Sandwiches is the obvious joke.
Sandwiches is where I was going. That's what I was looking for.
I don't remember where that's
thought
from.
of sandwiches, I guess, means the same thing. So,
yes.
The only other note I have about that Wesley plot is Ann Gillespie, the actress that plays the wife of the husband-wife team. This is her only episode of Next Gen, but she does a 4-episode stint on Deep Space Nine as Nurse Jabara, which apparently on IMDb is what she's best known for, even though she did 55 episodes of Beverly Hills 90210 and then returned as the same character for 6 episodes in the 2009 or 2008 reboot. So I would feel like she should be better known for Beverly Hills, but apparently she's best known for Deep Space Nine.
No, see, this is proof of what I've been saying, is that you can't really rely on that IMDb
it's
algorithm for best known. No.
And this goes in the Prime Directive thing, and I know we'll go in and out of that, just as this episode did, and how the Prime Directive was applied works. But I don't understand, and this is where I was like, Jimmy, help me. So these planets are crumbling or whatever. They're having these issues. And I love the scientific explanation, even though obviously it has no basis in our world because we don't have dilithium crystals. But I love the eventual explanation because I thought, like, okay, that makes sense. That actually makes sense. Isn't necessarily story serving. It just says, here's what's causing this issue. But anyway, I didn't get how stopping a geological issue on a planet violated the Prime Directive.
It should not unless they became known to the people on the planet.
Exactly. That's what I thought.
Right.
So that's what I thought was like, if they just cure it from above, then it's a miracle from whatever their God is.
Well, they didn't get to talk about if people on the planet might have had telescopes or radio satellites. I mean, okay. Let's get into all this.
Help me, Jimmy. Yeah, let's get into the Prime Directive because
the first I got a couple notes about the beginning of that story arc before we totally get into that. But
sure.
The first note I had was on Data's first hearing of the signal, where the little girl says, "Is anybody out there?" And he says, "Yes." To me, I guess that's innocent enough at the time, but now I think like Walking Dead and Fear the Walking Dead. And if anybody's out there, you better say no, because you don't want to talk to whatever those strangers are out there. They're going to kill you, even if your planet's dying. So that was through modern lens weird, because it's been co-opted for other purposes now. I also thought Data's plot with talking to this little girl, they kind of copied it over in Star Trek Discovery and in the short treks of how one of the main characters, Saru, played by Doug Jones, ends up in Starfleet. They did a very similar story where he was on a planet that is not advanced enough that the Prime Directive would not allow them to talk to him, but a Starfleet officer talked to him on the radio for a while and eventually made contact, and he got to leave the planet and go join Starfleet. So it felt very much a similar vein, and I wondered if who on Discovery wanted to steal this plot and why.
It did make me think. I know the Prime Directive's there, and at its base it makes sense to me, but I thought the idea that they would not answer somebody calling out to the universe, I feel like it's antithetical to Star Trek, because I mean, the motion picture is about V'ger, and V'ger has wherever it is, has this thing on it. It's like, hey everybody, we're from Earth. Let us know what you think about our record we sent you. Hit us up. And I feel like they're saying like, oh no, if there's aliens out there, they should not respond to us. And I don't know that.
No, Stephen, you're hitting on it. I've been waiting to say this essentially about this. This is where I disagree, and that is essentially the point. Is that there is no reason why, for especially given their mission to explore, that if you receive a communication saying, "Are you out there? Is anybody out there?" It could be a plea for help from a ship, or it could be anything. Why wouldn't Data said, "Hey, yeah, we're here. What do you want?"
Well, you use the equipment on the ship to see what it is first before just saying, "Hey, what do you want?" Right?
I don't know.
I mean, he's got sensors. He's got all this sophisticated equipment, and he's just going to respond before like making sure it's coming. I mean, it was some old radio signal, and they made sure to mention it was a very primitive technology that was sending the signal out. So for him to just respond that way seemed bizarre to me, because more likely than not, it should have been somebody he shouldn't be talking to. And they probably weren't looking for somebody in space. They were probably looking for somebody on their planet to talk to.
She certainly seemed to be aware that they were in space by the time he got there. I don't know how much information had been exchanged up to that point exactly, but it seemed like the conversation progressed in a way that seemed natural to Data at the time, before he realized how exactly what kind of situation she was in and whether or not they should have been aware of space travel.
I don't know.
I didn't know if she knew where he was talking to her from.
Yeah, I'm not convinced of that either.
But now I'm wondering if there are aliens out there that are getting our ham radio broadcasts out there. They're like, should we respond? Nope. Gleep and Glorp or whatever, the Simpsons guys are like, well, no, they're just going to take over. But
no, that's Kang and Kodos.
Kang and Kodos, sorry. That's who.
Star Trek references, which is kind of funny.
Sorry. Kang and Kodos, you're right. That's who I'm thinking of. Yeah, so they'd get it and be like, all right, we're coming over. And I guess while the good guys are debating whether they should get back to us.
That's an interesting thing to bring up, too, if you think about it. Just, we haven't really gotten into the idea of our real life and whether aliens are out there, whatever.
Yeah.
You have to imagine that
stop by.
That maybe, they probably have. I mean, if they're advanced enough to do that, they probably could have just monitored things for a bit and made that decision and gone, we are not going to respond to these people.
Yeah.
Look at this place. No, they're not ready.
I'm getting ahead of myself before next week's episode, but they're probably like, they're savages. We'll come back to these guys if they don't kill themselves in the meantime. Let's not waste our time. They can't fix our planet just by fixing some geological things. Yeah. But if they could, then they should do it.
So, yeah, I think they should have fixed the planet. I don't think that should have been a debate, because the Prime Directive is about not interfering with the civilization's development.
Right.
And I feel like saving them from a natural disaster without revealing themselves is still not interfering with their development, but doing it in a way that saves lives, which clearly is something the Federation values. So
Exactly.
I don't know why that was ever a problem or a question.
Well, I mean,
Data shouldn't have talked to her. Data shouldn't have talked to her in the first place.
Well,
Picard saying whoops, like, it just felt wrong from the beginning to me. I don't feel like Data would have done it. I felt like there was enough equipment there to warn him away from it. And yeah, I that was my first big thing, was I had a problem with the story happening at all.
I think.
Data would respond.
well, see, wait, I disagree with that part too, because I think that, Jimmy, I think you've already answered your own question earlier. It's that initial mistake that made everything a problem.
Yeah.
Once it's because they found themselves in a situation that they only became aware of the problem because they were communicating with someone on the surface, and that then made it an intervention that someone would have been aware of.
Genie out of the bottle. Yep.
Yeah. So they managed to plug the bottle back up at the end. Because Picard took the time to think about, is this possible to do? Whether it was successful.
That is a whole nother thing I want to complain about.
We'll get into that.
now that ties into something else that I wanted to say that Stephen touched on earlier. I just one little note. But whether or not these things are actually accurate scientifically, whether these things are actually possible, it felt to me like somebody took the time and care to make it seem plausible at least.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't, I could debunk it. Maybe anybody could have, if they were experts, they can look through this. But it felt like it made sense to me, even the memory wipe part, where they could just as easily have said, "We've got future tech to do that," and not even gone into the how and why of it.
Yeah, I suppose like the last couple episodes, right? Maybe I can't remember. I'm thinking Times Squared. I think it's the Times Squared or whatever squared, where they got real jumbly with the science. At least this one, like, we're going to try and explain the science, even though it's science that doesn't exist. We're going to try and explain it. And I really appreciate that. And that goes back to the whole idea of like, there's not something imminent about to try and destroy the Enterprise this episode. It's these other little stories going on. And I actually enjoyed that aspect.
Yeah.
So
that's what I noted this weekend, the last time that happened. It's just something about the sci-fi really comes through when they don't try too hard to make it seem like there's this, Avengers level peril that's going to happen, or even just like the ship wide peril.
And I kept waiting for something to be introduced, and I'm glad it wasn't. But I mean, obviously the planet falling apart created its own peril, but the idea of Data responding shows him becoming more of a human, or whatever you want to say.
Yeah. And Picard said as much at the end too, which is debatable.
Which I thought was a really nice scene.
Yeah.
And while we're jumping to that, Picard, the one person in the history of the Enterprise who locks their friggin' door because he has to tell people, come. So I appreciate that part.
Maybe it's just respect or something.
I was going to say, it's right off the bridge, and he could be working or he could be jerking off.
That's true. Whereas Kirk would have been like, who's there? Come on in. If you're coming by, come on in.
The thing is, they may have walked in on Picard jerking off enough that now they ask if they can enter first.
Oh, wow. All right, so
that's the Universe Journey version of this.
The horse race videos,
That actually makes sense for Universe Journey.
Speaking of Picard, this goes back to something earlier in the episode where I think it's Riker tells Wesley, he asks himself, what would Picard do?
Uh-huh.
Which I thought was, I in the moment, it actually, I like it. It's a cool thing.
Yeah.
It seems like, it's not the worst idea so far.
I liked it because it was as much about Riker as it was about Wesley in that moment.
Yes, it was. Yeah,
that's why Riker's there.
I think my only stop on it was I asked myself what would Kirk do.
Sure.
And then I do what Picard would do.
Right.
Hopefully.
There's that was one of my notes as well. I thought that's where I noted the complement, or rather the I can't think of the word right now. The complementary nature of the A and B story. The whole idea of there being this sort of mirror to it, and just even showing how Picard might not do what Picard would do in certain situations if presented with the right circumstances. So I'm going to thinking it through. Jimmy is right for the most part. I mean, there's some things that are probably happening that weren't characteristic, but I liked that they got to be able to explore some of these ideas that they might not have otherwise. I mean, even up to the point where they made the decision, at least, Picard was in a position where he was. I just like the way that the personalities were coming out during the debates. They needed there's a little bit of nudging that had to happen to set this up. But once they got into the meat of it and started thinking, explaining to us, for our benefit, here's why you wouldn't do this in most of these types of situations. But if you get down to it, once you hear that little girl say something, you have the option of interpreting it several different ways. And I think the point was that he chose, the interpretation of law isn't something that can be that black and white or absolute. And when it comes down to it, it's intent.
So the meeting in Picard's quarters, which first of all, I thought it was interesting that he had it in his quarters. Mm-hmm. I mean, that clearly set it up to this probably isn't kosher. We probably shouldn't be doing this. Let's keep it casual. Let's keep it whatever. He even set out refreshments. We saw Geordi get up there and pick some up off the table, which I thought was interesting. But the debate over the Prime Directive, while as a philosophical concept of let's think about what the Prime Directive is, it was interesting, made absolutely no sense to me in this context because they were very much talking about it in the most broad and basic terms of like, well, could we help them if this is happening? Could we help them if there's natural disaster and everything? And Starfleet had to have thought about this stuff a little bit and had guidelines for a lot of those situations. So that's they didn't need to be a debate because they should already have regulations and ways to deal with it. Now, if they want to have a debate of should we ignore those regulations, sure. But to actually have a debate about what the Prime Directive is in the first place and what their responsibilities are, that might be something they do when they are drinking some night. But in this context and in this manner felt super artificial to me.
I still disagree, but we'll get to that. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Keith, because I'm might be right in between the two. On this
okay, here's what I think. I mean, we have laws right now that should be something that you think of. Yeah, this is an absolute thing. Yes, this is how things work. Why wouldn't people already know that? But we have lawyers for a reason because. And judges, because there are still certain gray areas that can come about. You can't absolutely anticipate every possible iteration of a situation or some other type of concept that would come up, and not everybody on a crew would need to be as familiar with the way that those things would work for their positions, and that's why their personalities were coming through. The way that they would approach things was coming through.
Yeah, and I wrote. It's a weird but interesting conversation, which I think it's weird, Jimmy. I think points to the clunkiness of it, but I think it's interesting, Keith, too. I think it's an interesting conversation. My big problem with it, and this might point more to Jimmy's thought, is actually both of you guys. Actually, Riker's like, "Well, it's fate. What are you going to do?" And I'm like, that feels antithetical to what Starfleet is. If it's just fate, then why are you guys out there? Mm-hmm. What are you doing out there? And I was just like, I didn't turn the episode off, but I wanted to. But
was a bad line. But to respond to Keith's points,
sure.
I think my problem with it isn't that they might not have their own opinions or that there isn't room to have some sort of debate. And if they were specifically debating the merits of this specific situation because this was outside of the norms, then that's worthwhile. But the way they were phrasing the questions in the debate didn't feel like that to me. It felt very much like the Prime Directive is just a super vague guideline that can be debated completely in every situation, and there's no right or wrong answer, and that's not the way it's presented in the rest of Star Trek. It is law number one. It is the most important rule that the Federation has. They would have more guidelines than just don't interfere with people. They would cover some of these eventualities and have things. And if they wanted to debate the specifics of this instance and how they go against those, that's fine, but that's not the way the debate played out. So that's why I had a huge problem with it. And also, again, it's rule number one. So whether it specifically pertains to their job or not, they all should have had some training and some thought about this before now.
Right. Yeah. I grant a lot of that. That does make sense. But the thing is still just
it felt like it wasn't bad writing. It felt like they had to twist and bend the logic of the story so that they could have that conversation. And that really bothered me.
What I was about to say is that still, as the captain, he would have had to have had had to have thought these things through to a certain point. What these people have been in Starfleet for a long time, and what they learned in the academy, from a textbook or some lecture one time isn't going to stick with them necessarily for their entire career. And they would need certain kinds of refreshers in the concepts of it. And what the captain was saying, these are the sorts of tools you would use in a debate or even some sort of argument. You have to kind of fall back on the symbolic nature of how these things work. You have to give some other analogies. This is analogous to this other situation where this would apply. He was breaking down for them what they were saying, the logic of their argument, and then taking it to like an extreme to show them, to kind of re-educate them on why things work a certain way.
Yeah, I thought it was part like, hey, if you've never heard us talk about the Prime Directive, we're going to talk about it now. Because there's definitely episodes this year, whether it's original or this, where it's like, well, this is the Prime Directive, and that's how. And what I said is the deal. But I think, for me, as a person who's watched it, obviously all of these so far, there's sometimes I feel like they do play fast and loose, which I think here is, like we said earlier, the whole geological thing is like, well, we can't do that. It's against Prime Directive. It's like, no, it's not. But maybe, and I guess that goes to what we've been talking about is the Prime Directive, like the First Amendment, is open to interpretation by judges and all that kind of crap, and Starfleet, administrators or whatever. And so I guess, and I guess they're always going to find new circumstances that may or may not apply, but.
Right. I mean, this one can't possibly have been written out verbatim in a textbook somewhere.
Right.
What do you do if a little girl asks you a question and then her planet is about to blow up and blah, blah, blah? You have to start thinking things through in a certain way. And your
android on the android on the ship responds.
Yeah. You have to start like tossing out some other examples to try to compare it to it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's literally.
But I think they would have had there would be regulations on, okay, if there's a geological disaster, this is what you can do and this is what you can't do.
I feel like that you're kind of going where I was going, Jimmy, which is I feel like this is like a constitutional law conversation. Yeah. And I feel like the geological thing, that's an easy one. If you can't answer that on the exam, you get an F. Yeah. Some of the other issues, your android responded to a message he shouldn't have, and now you're already in.
Yeah.
That's a gray area.
Right. But how many geological situations could there possibly be that you could actually fix?
Right.
Too. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
And it also really bothered me that Picard had made up his mind until Data played the little girl's voice, and then all of a sudden it was completely changed. Picard's not that wishy-washy.
The Prime Directive shouldn't work that way.
Definitely not.
Okay.
Because if it had been a 57-year-old woman on the planet, he was out there. He'd have been like, well, nothing I can do. Actually, even more, if it had been a 57-year-old man. Hey, is anybody out there? Nope, sorry, gotta go.
Damn it. I think you guys talked me into it.
So much of this just really, really bothered me. Why, like I said, why did Data answer in the first place? Then why did he beam down? I mean, he could have beamed her and without beaming down or without revealing himself. I guess
I have a much bigger problem with the beam down than the response.
I had a huge problem with the beam down. That's when I was like almost forgiving some of this stuff until he just beamed down.
Well, how would you find her without beaming down?
Sensors?
Yeah.
How would he have found her to know where to beam in the right first? So they beamed in the right place in the first place.
Probably where the transmission was coming from, certainly,
right.
Or if she said where she lived or described it, he could find it. But where she physically is, how could he possibly know that from a? I don't know. I mean, she wasn't at home, and so. Okay,
but again, I don't know. I just had a big problem with him beaming down. I thought that was just. I mean, contrived and.
Yes. They could have saved them without beaming down, right?
Yep.
That whole part.
And they're saving the planet anyway.
Yeah.
They're saving the planet anyway. So why did Data need to beam down at that moment?
Right.
They didn't know that they could at that point. I'm not saying that it's great that all that happened, but at the moment there were explanations for it. But let me go to at least one positive that I have left here, and this is the thing that I think that Jimmy would have liked about the episode, possibly. Is I wrote that the crew seems to have reached peak familiarity with each other, and that they're this comfort place where everything seemed to kind of gel in a certain way, and there's certain shorthand happening. I really liked the transporter scene with O'Brien, just that whole take a nap. They knew it was just this kind of understanding of how things need to work sometimes, and that he, assuming that it's, again, it's contrived in the sense that we all know that it's for a good, and a viscerally good seeming reason to save a little girl or help her out. But yeah, this would certainly be upsetting if it were for something that were more overtly corrupt, some other sort of selfish reason, perhaps. And that is when, you wouldn't want to have that wiggle room for these kinds of regulations.
Yeah, I also noted O'Brien in the snoozing. I thought that was funny. Picard's hand levels, where he's like, how deep are we right now with Riker? That was amusing to me.
I enjoyed this.
I love that.
That was great. So, yeah, there were the familiarity. You're right, Keith. I'm enjoying that. The specifics of this episode, again, I felt like they had an idea of something that was interesting, but rather than take the time to figure out how to make it work story-wise, they just shoved it in there sloppily because they wanted to tell an interesting concept story. And don't get me wrong, I thought the concepts were interesting. I thought the debate was interesting. I just didn't think it made sense the way they did it and how it played out. Okay. I also did not quite feel at the end when Picard calls Data a friend that was totally earned, because Picard is still kind of standoffish.
Huh. I don't know. Well, I was with you.
The horseback riding seemed weird because that was the first time we'd really seen him bond with anybody.
Well, I
guess he took Data in for Dixon Hill.
Mm. Yeah. Well, not only that. I mean, the whole defense of his life. There are things that accumulate, and sorry, I want to break a couple of things down. First of all, I agree and appreciate with your arguments up to that point. I mean, it's I think you really did kind of help me kind of walk back some things, and I understand why. I understand your position as to why you didn't feel it was just automatically great, and that was kind of fun to get through that point. As far as I don't think we can ever really say absolutely that the relationships aren't earned, because we can't see every single waking moment of their lives up to a certain point. And there have been other interactions that have happened that could, even through the course of this episode, with Picard seeing Data behave in such a human fashion, it almost kind of warranted the idea of that, or some improvement of their connection.
That's a valid point.
Yeah, my last thing was like half a note, again related to the idea of the Wesley story with this one. And I just liked the psychology of it all. This the idea of showing this is how the command situations would work. Hearing the various officers' opinions, making this decision based on this, and what you think is going to happen, and then having some emotional element introduced into it, and still having to try to make some sort of decision. Whether or not it's realistic from from a starting point. That is a really good point, that some of the things were too artificial to get to there, but once they got to there, I guess is where I was. So.
And honestly, Keith, I was so distracted and frustrated with all the shortcuts they were taking that I didn't even really think about the parallels. But you make a really good point, and I'm glad you brought that up, of Wesley and those command decisions actually in action.
Oh, well, thank you.
My last big complaint, I've got just a couple notes, but my last big complaint is Pulaski can do memory wipes since when and how and why? Why don't they do it in every episode? I'm done. No.
Yeah, this is the end of Superman 2 thing.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, I'll fix everything this way. And so I'll tie these two Prime Directive notes together since you already started there, Jimmy. If you can erase the memory of anyone who knows about the Prime Directive violation on the planet, that you're violating it, doesn't that mean you didn't? I mean, isn't this like if a tree falls in the woods and no one's there, does it make a sound?
Perfect. Yeah, you got there just as I was figuring that out. That's at the time I thought this is fun simply because, or I like that they came up with an explanation for it, but the idea that that thing might even be possible and under some circumstances would then invalidate the reason for having something like that. They almost got to a point where they made it sound sufficiently complicated to say that this isn't something you can do every day. And if you have the opportunity to do it, which you might not under most circumstances, great. But it was, it complicates things in the sense of either providing an easy way out, that the whole Deus Ex Machina of the thing, and also you can't help but bring that into consideration for future episodes when they say that they can't do something, but could. And I don't know.
And I'm going to go back to season 3 of TOS episode Requiem from Methuselah, a scene I brought up many times where Spock says "forget," and he erases Kirk's memory of that. And it's a powerful scene in an episode that it's not a great episode, but it creates this powerful scene. And I think the reason I think it still works there is because I can't think of a time since then where we've seen Spock do that. And obviously there have been many opportunities for TOS characters to do that, but he hasn't. But I think I agree. I guess at the time you could have raised the same argument, like, what, is Spock going to be erasing memories all the time? Or has he been doing this all the time? But in hindsight, it's like, okay, maybe that's why it works even better. And I don't know the plan. And Jimmy, you can confirm or deny. I'm guessing Pulaski probably doesn't do this again, right?
I don't believe so.
Yeah,
I can't imagine that.
Which makes it one, okay, she just used it one. This is a special occasion, but it also is like, okay, well, but still, like, it does seem like a Deus Ex Machina. And again, I think the Methuselah one is a very touching moment because it's a friend trying to help a friend as opposed to what's going on here, but where the whole ship knows. Methuselah, the only person that knows is Spock, and that's it. And it makes him more human and all that stuff, and that whole arc or whatever. And I love that moment. I think it's a great moment.
Well, yeah, that's I just hadn't even really thought it through to that extent at the time, but now that I had time to consider that, it does almost invalidate the entire point of what had occurred up to that, up to then.
Yeah.
It should have been that they needed to live with the consequences of what they did, but in that sense, they kind of just like erased the significance of it. But again, the science of it, the way they explained it, it doesn't sound like I can kind of liken it to what you would do if you were in certain emergency situations, recovering a computer hard drive or something like that, or trying to catch a virus if you can catch it soon enough before something has happened. Those aren't circumstances that can always be true. But it would be hard to have to try to explain that to the audience or everybody in the crew every time something like that comes up, that you can't do it because of this. Well, why can't you if you catch it this soon or whatever? But,
recalling an email you didn't mean to send.
That's a very good example right there. If you were able to do that before something, before before it has gotten through, sure. It's not going to be something that happens every time, but maybe that one time in a million, you go, oh, I caught it in time.
My one other Prime Director note is at the very end when Data leaves the little gift or whatever for her, which I guess is a slight violation.
A slight? No, it was a big honking violation.
So it's not like he left behind some book about the mafia or about Hitler's Germany.
Here's how to turn your planet into a Nazi.
We'll see if Starfleet agrees with that reasoning at his court-martial. Well, at least I didn't leave behind.
I wasn't. So what was it he left? Was it a toy? I didn't.
It was the rock that from Pulaski's office, the Singing Stone.
Oh, huh.
He stole it from Pulaski, apparently,
and
asked her permission to give it to the little girl.
She's a little girl. So
wasn't his to steal.
I feel like the end of that would just be like the people on that girl's planet or Sachinka's planet just be like, where'd you say you got it? You take that right back to wherever you got that Singing Stone. And I don't want to see that here again. And that's the end. Or it becomes their god and they worship a Singing Stone and they're waiting for it to return. And
oddly enough, that makes more. I mean, no, that's kind of funny, but we don't know what she's going to end up remembering, really. Yeah. But the idea of her having the stone in her hand and the planet was just miraculously saved. Well, they might draw a connection like that.
Her terrible dad's going to take credit for that. That's what's going to happen.
My alternate episode is Sarjenko wakes up after she's been unconscious because the planet's falling apart and everything. And she looks around at her family, who are played by Patrick Stewart, Marina Sirtis, Diana Mulder. And she's like, I just had the dream and you were there and you were there.
No.
You were there.
The Wizard of Oz scenario.
Yes.
That's really good too, actually.
I like that. That's better than mine. My alternate episode was just instead of all this mumbo jumbo talk about the Prime Directive and how's Wesley doing, it's just pure action. It's just all the action aspects, planet falling apart, they're saving people from falling off of canyons, all this kind of stuff. That's my alternate episode.
They take it to Armageddon.
So I did want to mention the little girl Sarjenko was played by Nikki Cox.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah,
Yep.
Nikki Cox, very famous. It says she's best. Here you go.
Las Vegas, right?
Yes, I was gonna say, Keith. It says she's best known for Baywatch. She did 2 episodes of Baywatch. She did
What?
88 episodes of Las Vegas. She did a show called Nikki that she starred in. Did
Yep.
41 episodes.
Yep.
She was in Norm. She was
Okay.
in Happily Ever After.
Yeah,
Right.
so
Right. That's
Yeah.
insane. Were they say the best known was for
Oh, sorry.
Baywatch?
Baywatch was the 3rd best known. I
Oh, okay,
apologize.
right.
Las Vegas comes before that. But
Yeah, Las Vegas is what I think of immediately. We can Nikki Cox. Wait a minute.
what she's best known for apparently is Terminator 2: Judgment Day.
Hmm.
My other 2 notes were when she comes on the bridge. They ought to know by now. Picard hates kids on the bridge. That was just, why bring her on? That's just going to tick Picard off. I really enjoyed Riker hitting on the girl in 10 Forward. I don't know why I enjoyed that so much, but
that's one of my notes. I thought he said to her, "I'll see you later."
he did.
Yeah.
He did.
So
Well, I mean, it seemed like they were
and it was a
actually
family emergency that he left
Yeah.
it for.
it seemed like they were actually on a planned date of some
yes,
sort.
yes.
So
Yeah, oh yeah.
I like that.
Riker's a guy with needs. He gets his groove on.
I freaking love that moment. I thought it was great.
It was great. I mean, it showed you the Riker we all know is there, but we don't get
Yeah.
to see all that often.
Yeah.
So
And that's good that they just take a brief moment to show you something like that instead of making that like all he is, or even that's what the character is about. It is.
no, we don't want Riker to be creepy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
While we're in 10 Forward and talking about Beautiful Women, the blonde bartender was back this episode.
Mm.
I will be keeping an eye on her as we progress. I liked Sarchenko's long fingers. I thought that because Khalid.
oh yeah, the long pinkies.
Yeah, I like I know, regardless of what you felt about the episode, the last scene where Data's like, she'll never know I was there, and Pulaski's like, but you'll remember. That's the important thing. I love that, and so for me, Pulaski's stock is rising. She's on a roll the last 3 episodes.
So Wesley, annoyance factor. What's your scale, 1 to 10?
I expected to really get annoyed with him. I ended up at a 1. I liked him actually.
Keith?
I'm sorry. I love you. I love Jimmy's this episode. It is really going to telegraph what's about to happen.
You're all entitled to your own opinions. You can.
That's right.
So I'm going to
They
say
can be as wrong as they are. You're entitled to them.
I'm gonna say 2, and that is bumped up simply because some of the hallway scenes. As I said, that it doesn't quite flow the way they could have, but they were probably written into there, so they're like, "Let's do it."
Well, I'm going with a 5. This is as annoyed as I've ever been with him.
Wow.
I really just, and I don't think it was all his fault. I don't think it was all Will Wheaton's fault, but so much was wrong with that plot. It was annoying the heck out of me. So that gives his average a 2.7, which is among the higher ones he's had this season, but not all the way at the top. Steven, who is your annoying character of the episode?
It's just going to be for one line. It's Riker for his, it's fate. It's like, I did that, so it's Riker for me.
I really want to go with Davies because Davies is just so naturally annoying, but I'm going to go with Data because Data should have never freaking answered the call in the first place.
Wow. I can't even.
I'm glad I'm providing amusement for you guys.
Those are. That's hard to. I mean, I guess Davies. It's just. I liked it. I liked him at the end, but yeah, just. No, those are both good points. I don't know.
Do we have any crushes in this episode? Anybody want Davies as their crush?
No, and I again, blonde bartender love it. And I love Riker's lady, but I'm gonna stick with. I think I'm still on Vanessa, right?
You are
from Club Royale.
I'm sticking with my Anya teen girl version. Keith?
Not changing yet.
Okay. And ranking the episode, we know where
This is going to be a tough one.
It feels like a middle to me, but
Me too. Or yeah.
Okay. Well,
Jimmy, you do a good job. You do a good job of figuring out a good starting point usually. So we'll leave that to you.
That's funny.
So here's the thing.
This is going to be one of those later where it's going to be like, how is this up here this high? And Jimmy's like, I didn't go for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, here's the thing. I'd be looking to put it in the bottom 3 for sure. if it were just
So,
me.
What's 3 up from the bottom?
The Schizoid Man.
Ooh.
So based on what you two want to do, and I think you're just going to have to rank this yourselves because I really hate it. Let's start around the middle then.
what's
Okana.
No, hold on. What's above Schizoid Man?
Yeah, I think that's a good start.
Loud as a whisper.
I like this better.
Yeah. I think we're in the right territory though.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Contagion.
What's above Contagion?
The outrageous Okana.
Okay. Yeah. So this sounds like a good settling point somewhere in
So
here.
I would say, I mean, you talked me out of a lot there. So I would say probably between Okana and Contagion, maybe.
I think so too. I think I'm gonna have nostalgic feelings for the outrageous Okana also.
Yeah, that seems to be
It
like
was a fun episode. It was.
Okana is just there's a lot of just nostalgia there. All right, so to live dangerously, what is above Okana?
Unnatural selection.
That's one already. I'm like, I didn't like that episode, but maybe I did. Maybe I was the outlier on that one. I like it between outrageous Okana and
Contagion.
Another one. Contagion, yeah.
Okay, that's where we'll put it then. Next week, we're going to be talking Q Who.
Oh,
Let me see what the official sentence is. Q tries to prove that Picard needs him as part of their crew by hurling the Enterprise 7,000 light years away when they encounter the Borg for the first time. I think that's an inaccurate description, but we'll watch it and find out.
Well,
I haven't seen it yet, so I can't comment. But
Well, I remember it well enough to say I think that's an inaccurate description. That Q joining their crew is not really the point of it, but
yeah. You're probably right. I'm guessing.
I would say for descriptions you don't want to get. Well, let's save that for next week.
Right.
For next week. So until then, live long
And don't violate the Prime Directive and prosper.
and learn how to
talk
command.
to little girls on the phone. That's just
That's
just a good
that
rule.
goes for any planet. Any planet.
It's All Been Done presents.
Who's got the time?